Yeah, for some of the older insecticides, there have been shown that if you add PBO, it helps. With the newer ones like Coragen, like Ryman, Black Hawk, those kinds of things in Trust, we haven't seen any evidence that adding PBO at this point helps. Usually, when you start seeing a break in efficacies, when they start adding these additives in there to try to help things along a little bit. Also, you asked about surfactants. Typically, when we do insecticide trials, we do add a surfactant unless we're specifically asked not to add one in. It just helps with rain fastness and maybe to carry the product a little bit further into the leaf so it like lasts longer, which again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, with all these torrential rains happening, I think it's going to become more and more important to think about what can you do to make it stick around a little bit longer if we're talking about foliars and we're not talking about systemics. So I think that's important, and I think as Kaylee mentioned, we are going to be working on putting up on the EnviroWeather website a CPV model, because in some areas of Michigan we are starting to edge closer to that point where we can maybe complete a third generation of beetles, and I think just keeping an eye on that will be important. And secondly, I think many growers I think have maybe a hard time telling when that first and second generation are in the fields, because the first generation adults are going to hang out for a long time, like they can live for months and months, and so at one point you just start seeing a mix of first and summer generation of insects. And so then you ask the question of, okay, so I've done my first generation management tactics and now I want to switch over to the summer generation, but when is that point in the season? And I think that there's no clear answer, because you do have these stragglers that are hanging over from the overwintered generation, but a model could tell you more precisely when that summer generation comes on, and so you can then switch over to those summer generation products, assuming that the majority of the beetles that you're going to be managing are from that summer generation. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the trials that we do in here, we have like a much clearer separation between the overwintered. We have like a pause and then the summer, so we have like a really easy way to tell that. But I know that that's not the case in a lot of commercial fields. Like, you don't have a pause, you just have an onslaught of beetles, and then you wonder like which is the overwintered and which is the summer, right?
When you're getting hit in the head by a adult lion.
Yeah, exactly. So
that's probably summer.
So anyway, I think that those are the kinds of things that the model can help with, if you're trying to like guesstimate when you should switch over to using like a different class of insecticides. Good question. Any other questions? All right. So I have two handouts. Maybe Kayla, you can help me pass these out. So one of them is a handout that I wanted to talk about here a little bit, because now that we are in this pandemic world and people have heard about RNA vaccines, I wanted to mention that we have this new class of insecticides coming along that's also based on RNA technology. And you may have heard about it. It's been in the news somewhat, although not very prominently. But there is a product that's currently under review at EPA, at the Environmental Protection Agency, that's relying on this technology, and it's for Colorado potato beetles. And this is like the first one that's ever made its way to this far along in the process. And so I contacted EPA and I asked them, how long before growers are going to start seeing these in the field. And they're not sure, because it's sort of, they're paving the way with registering this class of insecticides, so to speak. They have one that's going to be released for field corn, I think, in the next year or two. It's like really far along. But for the smaller crops like potatoes, it's maybe going to take a few more years yet to start seeing it in the field. But I did want to talk about it, because sooner or later, this is going to be the next class of insecticides that's going to be the only new kid on the block, so to speak, because we just haven't had a new insecticide class for a very long time for Colorado potato beetle come along. Everything that you see is sort of termed as new insecticides. If you look at the labels, a lot of the times it's a mix of two old insecticides that's marketed as a new product, which, so to speak, is a new product because it's a mix of two old products, but it's not a new class of insecticides. And in general, we don't recommend that you use those mixed products because of resistance management purposes. But the RNA is not a chemistry in the way that the older insecticides are, right? So it's getting at RNA instead of getting at other mechanisms that rely on chemistry. And so in that sense, it's like a completely new way to kill the insect. And so the reason I wanted to talk about it is because you're going to start hearing about this, and you're going to start maybe seeing it in the places that you buy insecticides from, and I wanted you to understand how they are different from the currently available insecticides. So some of the features of the product that's currently being reviewed by EPA is that it's foliar. So, you know, some people like foliars, some people are more looking for at planting products. This is one that's being developed for foliar use. So you spray it just like all the other foliar insecticides, but the insects, when you spray this particular insecticides, don't just fall off the plant and die. They actually have to consume the tissue that's being sprayed with the RNAi insecticide for them to start experiencing these toxic effects. So it's not a contact insecticide. And I think that's always like a switch in people's brains that we have to like switch on to understand that just because you have sprayed something, insects are not necessarily immediately going to die. Furthermore, it's better, again, unfortunately, at smaller stages. So smaller larvae or larvae in general are probably going to be better targeted with this than adults, although the company says that it's effective on both adults and larvae. So you spray it on, the insect needs to ingest it, and then it's going to die eventually, but it's going to take a few days for it to happen, so it's not an immediate effect. You can tank mix the product with other insecticides, so that's fine to do that. You can use surfactants and things like that to make it stick around for a longer time. One of the benefits that the company is really promoting is that this is not a broad spectrum insecticide, so you can't, count on it for killing other insects. The RNA is a technology that's targeted at killing only Colorado potato beetles in this case. You can design other insecticides that kill other insects, but this is only designed to kill a Colorado potato beetle. Nothing else will die. So if you have leafhoppers or tarnished plant bugs or whatever in the field, those are not going to be touched by this particular insecticide, which is, in EPA's opinion, it's a good thing because you're not killing a lot of beneficial insects or bees or whatever that you may have in the field. So it's kind of a desirable thing from an environmental perspective, maybe not from a grower's perspective, but if you know that that's the case, then you can mix in a pyrethroid if you have leafhoppers or something like that, and then spray it as a tank mix. So one of the other questions about this insecticide, and it's interesting to think about, is, so can insects become resistant to it? And the answer is unfortunately yes. So this has been done in the lab with other insects, corn rootworm, the studies that have shown that insects can become resistant to RNAi insecticides. In fact, they can show cross resistance to other insecticides if they become resistant to RNAi insecticides. So it's not one of those technologies that's just gonna continue to work. It has to be used as part of the resistance management program that we have been talking about for so many years now. It's just going to be one more tool in the toolbox and not a silver bullet that's going to change everything. Now, RNAi insecticides are not just in sprayable formulations. For example, the one that I mentioned earlier for field corn is actually incorporated into the plant. So there are other ways that you can deliver this technology. I don't know if that's going to be the next step to look at in the future as more and more companies are starting to look at this. But it will be interesting to see whether they can broaden the range of applications for this technology going forward, especially thinking about whether they can do something that's not necessary for the growers to drive through the field and apply, like either an at planting application or incorporate it into the plant. That's going to like cross over into that GMO territory that's being discussed with potatoes right now, and so who knows where that goes, but I just wanted to give you a heads up about this as sort of the latest and newest class of insecticides that's coming along for potatoes. Any questions about this? Yes?
So it's shorter residual. How short are you talking about for residual?
It's probably in the 1 week range that we're talking about, yeah.
Is it 4 years? 5 years down the road?
Yeah, I tried to squeeze EPA for that, and they weren't yielding. So I'm thinking yes, somewhere along those lines. Yeah, it could be faster, could be slower, but yeah. One more thing that I wanted to mention, not related to the RNA insecticides, because I had this interaction with people at EPA. I asked them about neonicotinoids, and neonicotinoids, I've talked about this in the past, are currently being reviewed by EPA, and so we're all keeping an eye on what's going on with that. It's part of their regular review cycle, so this is not an out of order review, so to speak, but we're keeping an eye on it because Europe has already banned neonicotinoids, Canada has banned neonicotinoids in the field, and so we're kind of eager to see where this trend is going. I think the mic is cutting out, but anyway, hopefully you can hear me. So what they told me is that yes, they're currently reviewing it, and there's going to be an interim decision at the end of 2022. So at the end of next year, they're going to come to some sort of interim decision, whatever that may mean. We don't know, but this has been, just so you know, this has been dragging on from I think 2018, this like trying to reach the interim decision. So it's been a very, very long time for them to even get to committing to some sort of interim decision in 2022. So that's what's going on with the world of neonicotinoids. All right, so I did want to mention I had two handouts going around. One was on information on RNAi insecticides, and the other was sort of an information sheet to help you guide yourself with like switching insecticide classes if you were interested in that. I also, we had a few communications over the course of the summer about what can you do when you have a bunch of adults in corn or in other crops that are on volunteers and are spilling over into your potatoes. So I put with an asterisk those products on that list that have been registered, so you're legal to apply it in corn. Of course, Colorado potato beetle is not going to be on the corn label, but it's legal to apply it in field corn, and it's going to kill Colorado potato beetles. There's like a whole slew of other products like carbamates and pyrethroids that are also legal to apply in field corn. They have sometimes activity on Colorado potato beetle, but I just wanted to mention that a lot of those are going to be, a lot of the populations in Michigan are resistant to pyrethroids, so it's hit and miss. I would say the majority of populations are resistant to pyrethroids. Maybe you can try the carbamate and see if that works. And then the 3 or 4 products that I put the asterisk next to are ones that we know are going to work to control adults, and you can spray it in corn. So, and then on the bottom of that handout, I gave an example of what a 3-year insecticide rotation would be with different active ingredients. So, it's just an example. Keep in mind there are other products that you can use.